So welcome everyone. This is a very tight 90 minutes, lots planned for everyone here. We're going to get the ball rolling where I'm going to introduce our Head of Education, Dominic Curran. We're going to spend half an hour talking about challenges that stress brings in education and an hour talking about solutions. We're going to have a couple of breakout rooms, chance for you all to meet and talk to each other, and hopefully you'll leave with some positive takeaways on what we can do and what could be the possible next step. So Dominic is our Head of Education at HumanWisdom. We met for a coffee about 6 weeks ago, and he's a retired head teacher and instantly said, Manoj, I'm all in. And I said, I've got no money for you. He said, I don't care. And that's been our premise. So he believes passionately in what we're doing and in this approach and how the impact it could have in education in the world. But before I begin, I want to say one thing. I'm not an educator myself. My background is I was a spine surgeon for 25 years. But I really believe that teachers or education or being an educator is the most important profession in the world, because the future of humanity is in your hands. And I know that in the day-to-day grind of teaching and life, we can forget that. And I'm here just to remind everybody of that. And that's really our perspective and why education is such an important part of the work we're doing at HumanWisdom. So Dominic, why don't you get the ball rolling?
Okay, thanks very much, Manoj. Yeah, as Manoj says, I recently left education, primary education actually, after 25 years, 20 of those as a school leader, 12 as a head teacher. And one of the reasons I left wasn't because that I didn't love the profession, which I still do. It was a frustration, an increasing frustration at playing the game of tug of war, as I see it. A tug of war between what was fundamental to me, what my values were, the reason I came into education, the reason I wanted to be a teacher, against what I saw as a system that was working against that was preventing me to making the impact that I really wanted to make. So I'm setting the scene here in terms of the impact I have as a leader, but I also want to mention just the impact that it has on teachers as well as students before we go into the solutions, as Manoj says. Physically, I was ill, I would say, due to the stresses and strains and the anxieties that I saw, the pressures of work, the pressures of an accountability system. Rather than battling against the system, the biggest impact, the biggest difference that I found was when I started working on myself, when I started doing the inner work. What that helped me gain was clarity of vision, clarity of mission, clarity of purpose. And it was only when I saw that did I become more courageous. I realized that the fear from this external system, the external accountability system, was almost debilitating. It was preventing me from doing the job that I really wanted to do. So I don't know how courageous I was. You'd have to ask other people who worked with me about that as a leader. But the one thing I did decide to do was do something about it. So I did take a leap of faith. I left education. When I say left education, I left the school, but I certainly haven't left education behind. It's still my mission to make a difference in education. And as a result, serendipity stepped in, and I saw Manoj being interviewed on a podcast and explaining about the HumanWisdom project. And we did meet, as Manoj says, around 6 weeks ago. We met for a coffee, and it was immediately apparent to me that this was what I've been looking for. This was the the vehicle that can make a real difference in education. And it's not about changing the system. It's about changing the leader from within. It's about developing the leader from within. It's about empowering people. Not only was the impact on me, but I saw the impact on teachers. And as a result of joining this project, you can see today we've got an international community, an international audience. And just the other day, I was able to speak to a teacher from Texas who spoke about burnout. And she experienced burnout as a teacher. And again, the more I spoke to her, I realized that the system within America also is a tug of war against the values of why we come into this profession, why we become teachers, to make a difference. But the frustration that exists when the system is in place that fights against that. She's left the profession, partly left the profession. She actually said she's become a substitute teacher. But as well as that, she's developing things that she believes will prevent burnout for teachers in the future. And we need our teachers in the profession. We need to keep them. And there is a recruitment and retention crisis. Not only did I have the chance to speak to teachers around the world, I also spoke to someone who now lives in Australia, who may be on this call actually, was also an educator, and who had children in Singapore, in the education system in Singapore. And their child was suffering real physical, debilitating illnesses. And although the doctors were doing tests, they couldn't find anything physically wrong. They concluded it was the stress of the pressure of the education system. If you've seen my talk that I gave a few weeks ago to the international gathering here at the Human Wisdom Project, I spoke about the purpose of education and have we got it on its head? Have we changed? Education is about drawing out. That's the root of the word, to draw out what already exists within. And actually, what we're doing is putting in, adding more and more. Now, there is a place for that, but that is not the only place. I believe that we all, every human on the planet is a diamond within, and it's about drawing out our gifts and our talents to make the world a better place, to discover our own purpose in this world and what we can contribute. What happened to that student in Singapore? They actually took the brave decision, courageous decision, to move countries, moved from Singapore to Melbourne to let his son go into a different education system. And within weeks, all of the physical ailments disappeared once the stress was removed. Now, I say this before we go into to discuss the impact that you're seeing as leaders in education, as teachers, and the impact on the students as well. What I discovered going back to this game of tug of war wasn't that I was pulling the rope against the system. It was actually my internal conflict. I was having a tug of war against what I really believed, what I valued in education, as opposed to what I was delivering in education. And what we need in our system across the world, we're talking about a Texan teacher, a Singapore student, I'm talking about a leader in England. We need courageous leadership. We need to develop the leader within, not just for our leaders of schools, but our teachers and our students, so that we can rediscover our mission and purpose and change the world. And I absolutely firmly believe that this project, this is why I went all in regardless. This project is the vehicle to do that. We can empower teachers, leaders, students, rather than leaving them feel disempowered and at the mercy of an external system. And the more people we have on this side of the rope, actually what we'll have is a movement across the world that will change the education system for the good of all, for the good of our children. And that aligns with my purpose. That's the reason I became an educator. And that's the reason why I'm fully behind this. I'm fully invested in this, and I'm fully invested still in the education system. So Manoj, I don't know if you can...
No, thank you, Dominic. So for those who joined us a little late, Dominic is the Director of Education for HumanWisdom. And we'll be talking more about what the HumanWisdom project is trying to do in the world. A special welcome to the teachers I've already been working with. So Julie and Carl, and I'm going to get you all to share 2 pennies about the work we've done over several years with the children. Because though today we're talking about adults and teachers, HumanWisdom is working with children for a number of years now. And that's what really got me to build the HumanWisdom project, because I discovered something amazing, which is children already have this wisdom. We go to children saying, I'm going to teach you something. We should be sitting and saying, what can you teach us? What can we learn together? And when you take that approach, not only do you learn so much more, but the children discover their own inner wisdom as well. Rachel, thank you for joining us. Rachel is our guest today. She's director of Pixel. Talk to us about Pixel and your experience of stress in education and what you all are doing about it.
Yeah, so lovely to see you everybody this morning. So my name is Rachel Johnson. I'm the CEO of Pixel. So we work with 2,500 schools across the country, primary schools, secondary schools, post-16 providers, hospital schools and alternative provisions. So I have worked at Pixel for a number of years, but started being the CEO in January 2020, just before obviously the global pandemic, which has been interesting. But we work with school leaders predominantly. We reach young people because of course at the end of all of our work is a young person. But we have chosen the vehicle to work through what we call raising standards leaders in schools and head teachers. So that's what we do. We provide lots of different things to schools, but essentially our 3 principles touch on some of what we've just talked about actually. So our 3 principles are improving life chances and outcomes for every young person. The second thing that we have as a principle is to equip school leaders regionally and nationally. And the third thing is to help school leaders be the agents of change for the betterment of young people. And we spend a lot of our time on leadership development, on talking to leaders in schools about how we can create change. Because of course, at the end of all of us in schools are thousands and thousands of young people. And most adults in this country come through our hands first as children. And so we have an incredible chance to make an impact. But of course, at the minute, that is a real challenge, I think, in schools. And I think this character piece that we're talking about and this understanding ourselves piece is really, really important. And I think for educators, there are a number of key themes that come out of education, which I kind of think if we don't get sorted, what kind of model are we giving our young people? So one of them, I think, is around that notion of feeling out of control. And I think a lot of school leaders at the minute feel completely out of control. My husband is a head teacher, so I live with this daily. 20 staff absent, COVID cases, half the school off, discipline issues, children who have become completely unsocialized and don't know how to sit in a classroom. He's a secondary head, quite different issues to primary, but the same things are coming through our network. So there's a sense, I think, in the profession that we are out of control, or it feels out of control. I think the second thing linked to that is that people feel like their boundaries have been smashed right down. So you'll hear people say things like, I can't go to bed at 10 o'clock. I've got to finish all this work first. And so you have a profession of school leaders who are pulling all kinds of hours out the bag to try and get the work done, and the work still can't get done. And so to add to the kind of level of feeling out of control, there's that sense that my boundaries are being smashed down, and that doesn't feel comfortable. And the third thing that we're really hearing from our network is that sense of feeling like this is all being done to us, that we are not really agents of our own destiny, that we feel like we're being done to. And I think coming from that is that sense of almost feeling a bit like a victim to this. Like, what can we do? We are powerless. We can't do anything. We're completely out of control. And I think those three things together is where we are trying to support leaders. And I think what I would say about all of these things is what Dominic has said, is that actually we do control more than we think we do. We control what we think, what we feel, how we behave, how we interact, how we speak to people, the perception we're going to take of a situation. We control all of that. And I think it's really important that we take back some control of some of these things, and that so do our young people. Because if you hear any year 11 or any year 13 talking right now, they will say things to you like, this is out of control, the exam's going to be cancelled, there's nothing we can do, it's all a waste of time, they're messing it up, our lives have been ruined, we can't do this, it's their fault. There's a victim kind of narrative that's creeping through that is really, really unhealthy. And if we allow that to continue, we're going to have adults who are very anti-establishment, feel like they're victims of what's happened and lose control of their own destiny. And that, I think, is at the heart of what we're trying to deal with at the minute. So a lot of what we do at Pixel, we do events and we give people strategy and resources, we have leadership development, and we have networking where people can get together. And when these kind of issues come up for school leaders and for young people, we try and give solutions. And one of the things that we've just been talking about recently is how we control the talk that's going on in our heads. It's based on the hopefully award-winning work by Ethan Kross, an American author who wrote the book Chatter. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. He looks at the evidence and research behind controlling what is going on in our brains, the chatter and what it's telling us. And for young people right now, the chatter in their brains is all consuming, and it's getting their behavior is not what we would hope because of what's going on in their head. And that, I think, is what Manoj is talking about. It's what we've been talking about, what Dominic has said. How can we better understand ourselves to calm that chatter down? When the voice in your head is saying you're inadequate, you'll never do it, you're a failure, no one ever believed in you in the first place, you have no boundaries, you're a victim to the world's circumstances. If that's what you choose to believe about yourself, then you lose all sense of agency and empowerment. And that is the problem, not just for young people, but for us, for every human being, I think, in the world. That is the problem. We have to be able to get some agency back and to listen to the narrative in our heads and say, my brain is talking rubbish. My brain is talking rubbish. That is not a narrative I'm choosing to accept, and I'm going to have a different narrative. And so at the minute, we've released some lessons into schools to try and get that under control. Around the narrative around exams, around pressure, around performance. This notion that if I fail my exams, my life is over is not helpful, but neither are the Jeremy Paxtons of this world that say, I got 10 U's and I made it to be a celebrity. Not helpful. Neither is helpful. And so I think it's around taking a balanced view. The pressure and the stress of this job and of the world is not going anywhere. We're never going to stop pressure. In any job in the world, there is pressure. What we can help with is how we handle it, how we position ourselves in it, and how we navigate it. And for me, that is linked to outcomes and life chances. If we want our young people to thrive, then we have to get this stuff right. And we have to get it right when they're very young, from when they walk in the door at reception all the way through until they leave us at 18, because these issues aren't going to go away. And so I think our job is to equip them to make sure they can thrive in a world of high pressure and high performance, but not be overcome by it. And I would hope the same for human beings and especially school leaders.
Okay. Well, Rachel, that's really great. Thank you. And full of passion. I can see you really.
I could talk all day about this.
No, thank you for that. May I invite Kim Cowie? Kim's and I have worked together. So we work at all levels. So with little children, and we'll hear from some of the teachers who I worked with, but also at university level with teacher trainees. And Kim and I did some very interesting work with her students. Kim.
Yeah, oh, hang on a minute. Sorry, I'm just the bell at the door.
So for example, I just speak to Kim's teacher trainee students. And one of them told me, I haven't slept for a week because I've got an assessment coming up. So 50% of teachers are leaving the profession in 5 years, depending on which data you look at. And it's something we desperately need to do something about. And one of the things is, if we could help people, as you said, Rachel, give them the skills to meet the challenges without getting too stressed, maybe we could make a difference.
Sorry. One of the problems of working from home, and the other problem, the reason I was in and out earlier, was because I've got a very old cat who's probably got dementia. Can't hear when he's crying, so he yowls. So if you hear some strange noises, that's what's going on. Okay, yeah. I'm now working in teacher education in Newcastle University, but for sort of three and a half decades more, actually. I was a teacher in secondary schools in the Northeast, from sort of history teacher right the way through to deputy head. My interest in this comes from really a long-standing interest in developing colleagues and students, children, and through to PGCE students who are prepared to question and challenge themselves, which is not always a comfortable place for either the teacher, the senior leader, or for the children. And it's a very long journey. And at the minute, I think one of the reasons I got out 5 years ago was because increasingly the school environment was closing down, and the school environment was becoming very narrow, very focused on exams, etc. I mean, everything that Dominic has said, that Rachel said, I completely agree with. And so I got out with the idea that I could influence new teachers who would question the system. Now, that's much harder than I anticipated that it would be, much harder. And I've got one of my ex-colleagues, Aurora, worked with me a few years ago, and Annika and I still work really closely together. And the issue is that because the system is so narrow and constricting, the people working within it have known nothing else. So the challenge for teacher educators, as it is for teachers, is to find the gaps to allow you to be a more grounded teacher, a more grounded individual. But at the same time, it's to look at what's coming through and really question the way we set things up. So another colleague, although we've not done a lot of work together, and Charlotte's already sort of introduced herself, is to just question the whole way that education is established. Not just should we have exams or should we have assessment that's, longer term, which is a big issue, but right back to the very beginning. And I think that's what we need education to be doing, and people who are working in education at whatever level to be doing. And there is real strain on senior leaders in schools, but that strain is, I don't think, any greater than the strain on young teachers or sort of teachers who are classroom based, whose main function is to work with children in classrooms. The strain on them is enormous, and that's not always recognised by senior colleagues. So I think the whole point of this project is for people to really think about who they are and what they want. And I think I've always tried through various means to do that. So again, somebody I've done some work with and have known for a long time, Chris Greathead, Transcendental Meditation was one of my early ways of dealing with the pressure that was crowding in on me. And that's been a lifesaver. Those ways to talk to children, and Annika and I have done work on this through things like Philosophy for Children, to really get them to engage with the things that mean something to them and allow their opinions to come through. And I've seen this work with very young children as well as sort of up to secondary age and into university, and with adults. And I think that's where human wisdom fits in. The whole idea of mindfulness, the idea of thinking, I can choose how I react. And I think that's what's important here. Why do I feel like this? Why am I panicking? Why am I afraid? Why do I feel inadequate? And I think that allows you to think, where am I coming from? What's my conditioning? I feel like this because in teaching, and more so now, I think, you've got a lot of high achievers, but we've won it through the system. They want to come into a system that tells them what they need to do. They never question why they want to be told what to do. But that's what a lot of teachers are doing now. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then there's a cognitive dissonance because it's disagreeing with their fundamental values, which I think Dominic mentioned. Their fundamental values of working with children, engaging children in discussion, engaging children in how to put forward their own views. And I think that's what human wisdom can do. Teachers can say to themselves, this is how I feel, this is why I feel like this is how I can modify, change, develop, grow and nurture myself, and then how I can understand more through understand more about my children. And I think about the students I work with, whether they're young or old or older, all the adults, the teachers that I work with. And I think that's important. I do think there's a major danger with all of this for the teaching profession, for education, not just the teaching profession, education right through, is that the more mindful you become, the more present you become, the more aware of yourself and how your learners are operating, the more likely you are to actually reject what is currently an extremely toxic environment to work in. So it's not that I don't think we can impact on that, but the number of teachers who are leaving tells you there's something wrong. Being more mindful and more aware of how you react and why will not necessarily keep them in the profession. Didn't keep Dominic in, it didn't keep me in. So, and I think, you know, it didn't keep Charlotte in. And I know Charlotte's got some views. I'm just going to quote your comment, Charlotte. Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. We talk about people who get through the tests and we see them as high achievers. They're not necessarily. And I think, again, that's what's wrong with our entire system. Children are written off because they can't get through the test, which is why something like Philosophy for Children and Human Wisdom, which talks to children, is so powerful because it's allowing their voices to come through. Children who might not be able to write stuff down have really deep understanding, deep philosophical awareness of themselves and of the world in which they live. But again, just to bring back this question of sort of the whole developmental thing from very young, is we need to look at this, the system itself needs to look at child development from womb and on. We cannot, teachers cannot sort this out unless we start that dialogue. Now, the government won't do that. So I'm not saying we have to wait for the government to act. We have to start raising the questions. And I think this allows teachers, students, children to raise the questions and be open to bringing in other people who can look at how do things work? How does the brain become hardwired? Why do some people run immediately? Why do these things happen? Unless we start asking those questions and not taking the first piece of advice or research that Ofsted throw up and assuming that's got the answers, we're really not going to achieve something. So I think that's where this comes in for me, that we really do question ourselves, enable our learners to question themselves, but more importantly and as important as all of that is question the system under which we are labouring. And I choose that word precisely because it's labouring. Okay, that's me.
Kim, thank you so much. So you touched on so many themes, and just to summarize them, we're trying, yes, the system needs change, but in the meantime, we're all in it. What can we do to build our inner human potential so that we can respond in the best way possible to all those challenges for ourselves and for the students? And for that, as Dominic said, we need courage. And to have courage, you need to understand fear. And, you know, and as Rachel said, we need to understand our chatter, and to do that, you need a mind that's quiet. So this is all the things that we're going to do with Human Wisdom. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I think we've been talked at for a long time, so I'm sure you would love a little break. So I'm going to take a 5-minute break. and say we're going to do some breakout rooms, say hello to each other, talk about how stress impacts you as an educator. And we'll come back in 5 minutes and keep going again. So I'm just going to open the rooms up now. I'm going to point you to a little interview I did with an 8-year-old girl called Sarah from Julie's school. And I promise you'll be completely bowled over when you take a minute to look at that later. And I also like to have a quick word from Carl. Carl and I have been working together. He's a head of a primary school, Dunstan Hill, and we did some work with the children. Carl, would you like to share some of that with everyone? Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome. And it's nice to see you, colleagues. Yes, well, I mean, I met Manoj probably 2 and a bit years ago, I think, at a head teachers conference, and everything he said chimed with me as a person. And then when I applied that to leadership, it still chimed. So Manoj came into our school, and I think lots of things we had in place were hopefully in the direction that he would see was a good foundation for building upon anyway. But I work with him, my staff work with him, one of whom is, I think, on this Zoom call. But I've had a lot of staff interest as well, which helps it be a lot easier to cascade this through the school. I agree with Julie's comments about, Julie's just down the road from me, but she could be in India. I've just had a conversation with a gentleman in India this morning. And I agree with her that it's important to realize the things that we can't control. For example, we started our year with everything that's happened, testing 4-year-olds for a reception baseline that we will then measure when they finish year 6. I mean, what an absolutely ridiculous waste of time, energy and resources. Yet there we are, we're plowing ahead with a statutory test. But I think since I've been working with Manoj, the element of control, when I felt in control of what I'm doing and what my strategic approach is, and my modeling that to my leadership team, I do feel, and perhaps the member of staff would hopefully concur with that, is that we can see that across the school. We take control of the things we can control, and we demonstrate that to children. And we did some lovely work with children where it just reminded us how astute they are, how connected they are to the world and the problems within the world. So whilst Manoj did lots of work to prompt those discussions, actually when they began to talk, he was able to be quiet, and we were able to observe how astute they were with the things that they noticed and could talk about. So, and I think one of the outcomes of that was we've launched a new behavior policy this year, and it's around the control of our emotions. So it's linked to the work that we believe is right, but also the work that Manoj has done with us around restorative approach to behavior, around those conversations and the impact of our decisions that we make as individuals. The thing, I've just had a chat with a child who was finding it difficult this morning to behave in a lesson, and instead of the normal approach that we may have taken, we've talked about the impact of that on others and why that might have happened, and we've discussed it a little bit more. I think that's a real sea change here in our approach. So we have an outcome here which will affect all our children. It's just made such a huge difference, not only to my external reading and my looking at philosophy generally, and opened some doors there, but as one of Manoj's first anecdotes around sitting in a car that's not moving when you're on your way to work, taking control of my emotion, and I know it's simplistic to say, but not getting angry and stressed. Work will still be there when I get there. Your staff team who you've worked with will apply the vision and ethos of the school, and everything will be fine. And then you pick it up when you get in. So a little bit of a trite example perhaps, but one that resonates with me. I hope that's helpful for, it's not a pedagogical discussion I've had, it's a coal-faced one.
Thank you,
but I hope
Carl.
that's helpful for colleagues.
Thank you. So I'm going to do a short presentation now, and then I'm going to talk you through the HumanWisdom app we've developed for supporting staff and students. And then we'll do a short breakout and maybe have some questions after. So here we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about meeting stress with wisdom. I've written this book. I can send you a copy of it. It's about understanding ourselves and how our minds work. We build this HumanWisdom app for adults. We've got a version coming for children and for teenagers as well. I was in a school last week, in a secondary school, talking to 17 and 18-year-olds. And I asked them this question: overall, how stressed do you feel? 72% said they're severely or moderately stressed. Then I asked them how anxious they felt. The numbers are off the scale, it's 57%. It depends on which study you look at. The numbers vary from 20 to 50%, but this is even higher. We know this. And by the way, the numbers are the same for teachers. If I poll teachers, we get the same results. But the next slide is going to blow your mind, because then I asked them, how does it affect their learning? 80% said it affects it a lot or moderately. So if education woke up to the simple fact that all the teaching you're doing is only reaching 20% of the students in the class, we would take a completely different approach. I was talking at a head teachers conference, teachers conference on Sunday. And this teacher, maths teacher, said, oh yeah, it's, this is a good subject for just before their exams, to help them deal with stress. I said, would you think it's okay to teach children maths for an hour before their exams and think they're going to get through? You start teaching maths from the age of 5 in the hope that at GCSE they're going to be getting through. But yet you're happy to talk about stress for 1 hour on a focus day once a year. So that really needs to change. Of course, stress causes lots of health problems, and you can look them up, everything from the common cold to cancer. And this is for staff and students. So that's why it's urgent to deal with it, because it impacts the immune system. So these are the questions we're going to explore in the next half an hour. Can stress be prevented, or is it inevitable? We never ask that question. Can we avoid it in the first place? How can we respond to a challenge without getting stressed? Is it always caused by external events or also by how our mind works? Because that's then in our control. How would our lives change if we lived with less stress? And how could we change the education system? And I'll talk about the next one later. Okay. See, in any problem, prevention is so much easier. We learn to swim, so when the challenge comes, we don't drown. Similarly, if we learn to understand ourselves and how our minds work, when the challenge comes, we can respond with this inner intelligence. So this is the question that Carl alluded to. Is stress caused by the event or by our reaction to it? Is it the common cold or is it the flu? So not everybody in that traffic jam is stressed, and not to the same degree. So it's always the event that triggers it's our reaction to the event that triggers the stress, not the event itself. But to get over stress, we can either change the event, which is easy, and if we can, we just go ahead and do that, or we change our reaction to it. How can we change our reaction to anything? You can only do that if you understand where the reaction comes from. And to do that, you have to understand yourself and how your mind works. But here's the problem. Throughout the world, doesn't matter which system you're part of, whether you're in Nigeria, America, India, or in England, or the US, we're educated only about the world around us, but not about ourselves or how our minds work. Why is that? Why is self-understanding not part of education at all? And of course, this awakens our own inner intelligence. So then it's not a coincidence that all these problems which emerge from our thinking, the world has no answer to. Humanity at the moment has no answer to. Stress is 80%, anxiety 40 to 60%, relationship breakdown 50 to 80%, violence, addiction, obesity. Obesity is not a food-related problem. It's again a thinking-related issue, and climate change. So since they all begin in our thinking, if we're going to avoid them and overcome them, we need a deeper understanding of ourselves and how our minds work. So our current education system can make you an excellent teacher, doctor, or lawyer, but to be an excellent human being, you need a different kind of intelligence. Call it wisdom. And after all, isn't that also the purpose of education? How do we create a new generation of excellent human beings who can meet life's challenges with calm, who can have healthy relationships without conflict, who can live with a sense of peace, who can take care of the earth? The environmental crisis is a human crisis. It's not out there, it's in here. It's the way we human beings are.
Manoj, could I just interrupt?
Yes, Kim.
Because I would suggest at the minute the education system isn't creating excellent teachers. I think we have excellent teachers despite the education system.
Good point, Kim. Well, I meant it just in terms of it's designed to help us get a job, is what I meant.
Yeah, they can get a job, but I think the way that, I think I said all how I felt, didn't I? I just think we need to know that the education system as it is now, excellent teachers are coming through despite the system because they're looking for support for something like this.
Yes.
Or working in philosophy for children or that kind of thing. Yeah.
So that's why we set up the Human Wisdom Project, because our time on earth is limited, and living with this inner intelligence or self-understanding, which you call wisdom, can help us make the most of this short time we have on the planet and live in peace with ourselves, each other, and the earth. So our students and our children and our teachers don't join that statistic, which is so appalling, of so many people who are stressed, anxious, and so on. So that's why I've been on this journey for 7 years. I used to be a spine surgeon. I left that to do this work. And what we really need is something in our pocket that we can access whenever we need. So we built the Human Wisdom app. I'm going to show you in a second. It has a lot of modules and screens, and it's just about looking and learning about yourself. The understanding is easy, but the impact it can have on our lives is profound. So for example, I'm born on this side of the street in Belfast, I'm Catholic, the other side I'm Protestant. We may grow up hating each other, but we never ask why. If we asked why, we'd realize it's the same unconscious process of conditioning that's affected both of us, but we weren't aware of it. And yet we are attached to our own narrative, as Rachel said, the chatter in our head. And as soon as we see that, we can respond differently. So with this wisdom or inner intelligence, we can live with less stress and anxiety, be emotionally intelligent, resilient, develop communication skills, have happier relationships, live with compassion because we see the other human being as the same as I am. My right hand I would never go to war with my right hand and left hand because it's part of the same body. We're the same human being. And we could live with a sense of peace, which is something that eludes everybody, no matter how much wealth and fame and success you have in the world. So I'm just going to take you through now and show you what the app looks like, and then talk through what we can do about stress. So it's at humanwisdom.me. There's a lot of content that's free to use. There's a section called Wisdom Stories. Children learn and adults learn from stories. So we have a number of stories here that writers have submitted. So for example, the first one is about a boy who had a temper and how his grandfather helped him. And then you can go straight from that story to exploring the anger module, should you wish. There's an online journal. We find journaling really helpful because it's a way of calming your mind down. So for example, questions like, what have you got to be grateful for today? Or what did you learn about yourself today? Or what's the kind thing you did today? So journaling is a very useful tool on this journey of self-understanding. There's an online
Manoj, can I just
sorry,
check,
Dominic.
Is the screen being shared? It isn't on mine. If you're sharing the app.
I can, okay, let me just, sorry, look at that again. I'll stop share and come back to it. Hang on. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that, everyone. So it just goes up and down. It's like a Netflix style dashboard. It's got 59 modules. It's taken 7 years for us to develop it. This is the wisdom story section I was telling you about. It's got 100 stories from around the world. The online journal, as I said, is a really useful way of calming yourself down. And these questions will keep changing. Like, what can you learn about yourself? Or what's the kind thing you did? Or what did you notice freshly as if for the first time? Because our mind takes what it already has for granted and focuses on the things we don't have. You know, for example, in England, we've got a free education system. You only have to go to other parts of the world where things are so poor, there's no money even for the chalk, for the blackboard. And then you'd come back and say, oh my God, we're so lucky. So it just depends on your perspective. And so for all of you, please have a look at these podcast section. And down here is a dialogue with an 8-year-old girl. It's from Julie's school. Her name is Sarah. And you'll absolutely fall in love with her and realize the potential little children have and how they already have this wisdom innate in them. So for those who need, there's a section here on the introduction to wisdom. Have a look at that. It's based on something called the 5 Circles of Wisdom. It's a program we've put together. And essentially, it starts with a quiet mind, as I think Rachel was saying, to notice the chatter, to learn how to look at yourself, understand how your mind works, understand your emotions, and then apply that to living with wisdom. For those who need support right now, there's a section. So for example, the stress video has 14 ways in which you can deal with the challenge of stress right now in your life. And it's just a 10-minute video which offers you all sorts of solutions at your fingertips. Sorry, it's taking a bit of time to load. My internet's not good today. And this is our full program. So the first part is on nurturing a quiet mind. There's a number of breathing exercises and meditations. Really important, because without that calm mind, really your mind is so reactive. You can't think of, you don't have that pause to think of the other ways in which you could respond. The Art of Inquiry has 9 modules. How do you learn to look at yourself? So to ask questions, how to look without judgment. The next section is the core of the program, how the mind works, not yours or mine. The human mind's like that. So we're all conditioned, or our mind compares all the time, or it's reactive, or we operate from self-interest, or we have emotional needs we're not aware of, and so on. Little children understand this perfectly well. We understand our emotions in the same way, because, for example, we always assume our anger is caused by what's happening outside, but actually it's actually caused by our feeling of being hurt or disappointed. And that comes from our unmet expectations, which again comes from inside. And then you can use this wisdom to live with use this wisdom to transform your life. And so I'll just talk you now through some of the things we can do. So suppose you have a situation which you can't change. How can you respond to that with wisdom? So there are 14 ways. We'll just go through them very quickly. Okay, so the first thing we can do is breathe, pause, slow the reaction down. These are mini podcasts, by the way. You can either
stress reaction,
hear that, or you can watch that, read that, and you can share that with other people if you want. So the breathing exercises on the app allow you to slow the reaction down. There's a little journal entry you can do here, a little reflection, again, which helps reinforce that. You could zoom out, regain perspective. As Carl said, it's only a traffic jam. I'll be late, so what? You know, it's not the end of the world, and so on. And you could then ask yourself, what have you got to be grateful for? Because this is the one little thing that can stop people harming themselves. Sometimes when you focus on a stress problem, we think there's no escape and there's no other answer. Zooming out, being grateful, allows you to consider options. Ask yourself if there's another way of seeing the same situation. And as Carl said, again, this child's behaving badly. What's the reason behind it? Is there something that's happened to the child maybe that morning, or what's the background behind it? And of course, then that gives you other ways that you can respond without getting angry with the child. You could respond to someone who's angry by saying sorry or saying nothing, for example. Acceptance dissolves stress. Stress is just the difference between how things are and how we want them to be. I'll repeat that. Stress is just the difference between how things are and how we want them to be. So by accepting things as they are, simple things like how someone's stacking the dishwasher, or how someone is delivering the lesson, it might be different to the way you would normally do it, but it's just different. It's not wrong. So acceptance dissolves stress. And little children will tell you that. I say to them, you're learning to ride the bicycle for the first time. What are you afraid of? I said, falling off the bicycle. I said, how can you end your fear immediately? And after a bit of teasing out, this is what we talked about, Dominic, about teasing things out of kids. And they'll say, well, if I accept that I'm going to fall off the bicycle, my fear goes away. It's just part of, and the same applies to Ofsted inspections, if you're going to, and so on. Whatever you can accept, your stress dissolves immediately. Do not escape. The mind responds to stress by wanting to escape. Alcohol, drugs, gambling, all that. And that can often make things worse. That's why addiction levels are so high, because we respond to the inner conflict by wanting to escape. In last year in America, 100,000 people died of drug overdoses. It's more than all the wars America's fought since the Second World War. That's in 1 year. Is it in your zone of control? Ofsted, as Julie said, not in my zone of control. I can't do anything about it. Forget. I can't do anything. I don't need to stress about it. This is the hardest thing to do. It's so easy to assume my stress comes from Ofsted, comes from how you're talking to me, my relationship, lack of money. But actually, that stress comes from my reaction. So if I can take ownership, I can do something about it. That's the key thing. If I think it's coming from you, I become powerless. So don't allow yourself, as I think somebody alluded to feel like a victim. That makes you powerless to respond. And to ask, what can I learn about myself? So every stressful event teaches us something about how the mind works. I'm going to mention that very quickly. And of course, knowing that this stress, this feeling is going to pass. Everything passes. have a positive attitude. We've done a whole podcast on that, and you'll find it in the podcast section, how to have a positive attitude. That makes the biggest difference sometimes. Like, I can get through this. Just having a positive attitude makes the biggest difference. Now, this is a challenging concept, and I'm going to let you look at the app to discover what this means for yourself. But basically, all of stress is linked to thinking, right? Because I'll tell you why. When you're stressed, if you distract yourself and watch a football game or something, for that time, your stress goes away. So if you can meet stress without thinking, it dissolves, because what you do is you cut off the oxygen supply and it can end. How to do that? There's a whole module on the app to teach you what that means. By the way, nothing I'm saying here has to be accepted. Someone say, what's the evidence for this? I say, you just look at the moon. What evidence do you need? There's a moon in the sky. You just have to look. If you see it, it's there. If you don't see it, it's not there. So that's all we're saying. We're just looking and learning about the mind that we share, you and me. So many people are stressed because of the pain that's happened to them years ago, and explore forgiveness and compassion for yourself. It's a gift that you'll give yourself and allows your pain to heal. So many people carry this pain and it just spoils their lives. And don't allow it to condition you and shape your future. But does stress actually come from the outside, or does it also come from within? So let me talk you through some of the things that can cause our stress that come from our own thinking, not just from the outside. So, of course, there are external causes of stress, and we know that. But here are 14 hidden patterns of thinking that, if we understood them, could help us live with much less stress. So what are these so-called inner causes? First is conditioning. I've grown up thinking the dishwasher should be stacked this way. You come along and you stack it differently. That causes stress. It's just the difference between how things are and how I want them to be. How I want them to be comes from my conditioning. See, that's all it is. So understanding your conditioning allows you to question it. Right now, you and I are not even aware that we're conditioned. It's not wrong, but we're not aware of it. And we become attached to it. So that's where our opinions, our beliefs, our aspirations for our life come from. A 10-year-old girl in an inner city school in this country told me her aspiration for her life was to have a baby by the time she was 16. That's not her, that's her conditioning. That's the environment she's growing up in. To counter that, you have to give her the ability to question her conditioning, to become aware of it, and then to ask questions about it. And that's all we need to do. It's the greatest gift we can give young people.
The greatest gift we can give young people.
Okay. Comparison. Oh my goodness. The mind compares all the time, automatically, unconsciously. You're telling me about your holiday. I blame you for my jealousy. I blame you for the anger that follows. I dislike you. And you know, when I went to children, I talk to children, I say, if someone gets more marks than you in maths, how does that impact you? The child says, I don't like my friend because they've done better than me. I don't like myself because I think I'm worthless. And I stop liking the subject because I think, what's the point of trying? These are the unconscious patterns of thinking that are driving human behavior, and in the classroom, which educators are unaware of. And the more we begin having these conversations, the more we can start shaping what we're doing in schools accordingly. Of course, we have many unmet desires which cause stress. Fear is the backdrop of education, for children and for teachers, and for head teachers, for everybody. How can any learning occur in an environment or an atmosphere of fear? no learning is possible. And this is why not only does the system need changing, but we also need a deeper understanding of fear itself. There's a whole module on fear. I'll encourage you to go through it. But it's just our imagination playing up, is what a 10-year-old told me. When I have conversations with them on fear, I'll send you some of these conversations that I have with them. So understanding the nature of fear, accepting uncertainty and whatever the future brings, can help us reduce anxiety and stress. This is another huge cause of stress for adults and for children. All our unmet emotional needs. I have a need to be listened to, but not the same need to listen. To be understood, but not the same need to understand. To be loved, but not the same need to love others, and so on. So it's a whole section and module that's explored in the app. But if our needs are not met, that can be a cause of our own stress. And of course, we blame others then for the stress we're feeling. Addiction is caused by the human need for pleasure and the human need to escape from pain. And both of those can lead us to addiction. So many teachers tell me they leave the profession because they can't cope with the constant assessment. See, so what is it that makes our minds so sensitive to criticism? Why can't we accept it with grace, saying, hey, there's something to learn. Thank you very much for coming and assessing my lesson so I can become a better teacher. That could be one way of looking at it. Or of course you can react and say, oh my God, I'm useless and I have sleepless nights and so on. So exploring the subject of criticism allows you to respond with intelligence and allows you to give criticism also in a much more intelligent way. And there's a whole module on criticism in the app. Anger is something that little children, oh my goodness, even 8-year-olds suffer from. And I say, what would happen if you expressed the same anger in the playground on the street outside? And they say, we'd go to jail. And they know the duration of the prison sentence they'd get as well. So these are kids in primary school that I spoke to. It's a major cause of stress. And again, it comes from our own thinking. Relationships are can be a big cause of stress. And again, we have a big module on relationships. So you can see that so many causes of stress are outside the control of the education system. But yet, the teacher who comes to work in your school could have had a bust up with her partner or his, that morning. You have no control over it. But yet, that teacher's performance is going to be affected that day. And so again, having this app in your pocket or something like that, living with wisdom, can help you meet those challenges differently. Okay, I'm going to pause there because I can go on and just talk you through some of the other things we have. So you can see there are whole modules on fear and anxiety, on pleasure, on anger, for example, relationships, which is one of our biggest modules. It's got 400 screens. Because relationships, even in the workplace, are critical for the harmony of any organization. How to deal with criticism, self-esteem, how to live with peace and deal with death, or how to be happy, communicate well, deal with addiction. And we have a big section on leadership, by the way, for leaders in schools who are interested in developing their leadership skills. Every leadership skill comes from wisdom, not from knowledge, not from experience. I say that because, for example, the number one skill for an educator or for any leader is integrity. If you want to live with integrity, you need to understand your self-interest at work. As simple as that. The number two skill a leader needs is relationship building. Again, that's not a skill that comes from anything you've been taught, and so on. So it's a whole section called Wisdom Leadership, and so integrity and honesty, of course, comes from understanding your self-interest, and it can be nurtured because it's a precious, fragile thing. And Eisenhower said that the supreme quality of leadership is in unquestionable integrity. And without it, no success is possible. So we explore that. And communication skills, again, something that doesn't come from reading a book, but comes from wisdom, and so on. So there's so much here that I couldn't possibly do it justice. But I'd also encourage you to read we've got a module called Transforming Education. And just to share some ideas on how this wisdom could become part of the education system. So I'm going to just stop sharing and go back to my presentation. I've got 2 more slides, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. So we've done this scenario, and we've done that one. We've talked about how it comes from our own thinking. So here's my question for you all educators. Do we need to test memory?
Question for my educator.
When it's all on the phone anyway. Right? Why do we need to test memory? It's a tiny facet of the human mind.
It's a tiny facet of the human mind.
Can we introduce self-understanding and wisdom as a subject in education? How could we do that? How could we work together to do that? How could we be brave, start a small project somewhere, and then build on it and show the difference to the world? Then the world will come knocking and saying, we want part of that too. So that's the job that Dominic and I have to do. And we'd welcome partnerships with any of you who are interested. How can we nurture the human potential and build on the potential of our teachers and the children to be excellent human beings? And how can we teach children and ourselves to care, not just for ourselves, but also for others and the planet and the earth we live in? If we don't answer that question, we're all doomed. Because at the moment, the education system is saying, we're going to teach you to be number one, to be successful at the cost of everybody else.
At the cost of everybody else. At the cost of everybody. Okay.
How would our lives change? My last question. If we lived with much less stress, we'd be happier for certain. If you are happy, you can be kinder. You can't be kind if your mind is only focused on all the distress in its own thinking. You could be healthier, and you'd make better choices with your life. We could avoid addiction and all of that. So, knowledge fades. Everything you teach children will fade. Maths, science, geography. Do you remember anything you were taught in school? But this wisdom, once awakened, can enrich your life forever. So if you'd like to get in touch, please contact Dominic, and that's his email, dominic@humanwisdom.me, and we'd welcome a conversation with you all. Okay, so I'm going to open that up for any comments or discussion. So just hand up would be great, or why don't we get the ball rolling with you, Rachel? Do you have any thoughts on that? Because we've been working together for a while.
Yeah, we've certainly been having discussions about various things. I think I've got a few reflections, really. I think the world at the minute of education has 2 spectrums. So you have those who say all of this stuff is rubbish and it's all about the knowledge. This is extremes, of course. Then you have the other side who go, the knowledge doesn't matter, it's all about this stuff. I'm very much in the middle. I think knowledge is crucially important. When I had my leg surgery by your colleague, Manoj, if he'd said, well, I'm a really lovely person, but I'm not so sure about this surgery, I would have run, even though I couldn't because my legs were broken, and I got out because I wanted the person who had the best knowledge of fixing my legs. I also wanted someone who was confident, who had a good bedside manner, who put me at ease. It's both together. Yes. And I think the role of education is to use the knowledge that is crucial. It might not be the pure knowledge we're delivering now at primary school, but we do use it as part of our lives. But knowledge is only helpful if you know how to deliver it. And we will have some young people who will get the most stunning GCSE results, and you would not want them working in your company. because they're not very pleasant people. They don't understand how to interact with others. They're arrogant, they're difficult, they've got attitude. You also, on the other side of the spectrum, might get some young people who don't get the best results, but you would back them every single day of the week to work in your company because they are brilliant human beings. And I think the role of educators, and certainly in terms of where we are with Pixel, is we believe knowledge is crucially important. They do need to pass exams in order to get to the next stage of their lives. That's often required. We need to manage the stress around that. We need to manage the messaging around that. But we also need to make sure that character development and emotional intelligence, which is what you're talking about, is taught, not just caught, that it's not something that only the middle class children have, or the children whose parents buy the right books and Waterstones. We need this to be available to everybody so that our young people have the best chance to thrive. And for me, that's both, marrying both together to make sure that they know what they need to know, but they are able to be the best human beings so that they can be an asset to themselves and to the communities they're living in, because that's how we'll get community cohesion. That's how we'll move the world on. That's how we'll have compassion and empathy and kindness and resilience, and a bit less of arrogance, lying, deceit, and all the stuff that we don't like. So for me, it's marrying the two together. And I think the challenge we will always have is there are two ends of the spectrum in education, and it's taking, in my view, a balanced view of saying both are important. There is a place for both, and we must work on both, because we are teachers of knowledge, but we're teaching young people how to be grown-ups. And that is essentially, that's where they're learning it. They're learning it by watching us as well as what's happening at home. And I think that's really crucially important. So I'm very much in the both are crucially important camp, and anything we can do at Pixel to help that, we do that, because I think it's really important.
Thank you so much. I think that chimes completely with what we're doing, and what HumanWisdom is offering is the other half, which is how to develop the human being, because the knowledge bit is already being done in education.
I think this is key. I'm not sure making it a subject. I think what we need to do is we need to infuse this kind of attitude through the curriculum, through, as Charlotte said, from 4 towards the grave, which is a bit gloomy, but so infuse it, because once you make it a curriculum, that's what you do on Tuesday afternoon between 2 and 3. So it's got to be much more powerful. And I would start with the senior leadership team, but that might not happen.
Okay, maybe one more comment, and then I'll ask Dominic to close. Anyone else have anything that we want to add, or a comment or feedback? Okay, Dominic, please, would you summarize that for us and help us talk about next steps? What could be the next steps for everyone here?
Right. How to summarize that? I think what I see there and what I've heard in the discussions is passion. We all want to make a difference in the lives of actually each other, our staff, the teachers, the children. And I think that's the important part for me. The question is then how.
How?
What it showed, that discussion showed me that it was wisdom is actually needed here.
Wisdom.
But we must start with ourselves. When we are aware of where it all comes from, when we have that self-awareness, that's when we can change the leader within. And I'm coming back to this tug of war. If we want to change the system, the education system around the world, we can only start with ourselves. If we get enough people on this side of the rope who believe and are congruent with what they value and what they do in education, the more we get, the braver we become actually as a community. And the stronger we become and tug on that rope, and the education system can topple. It's not about getting rid of everything. There is a middle ground. There are lots and lots of parts of the education system are needed. We need an accountability system in some way, but does it need to be high stakes, high accountability? or could it be high challenge? So there's lots of areas I think we could go down, but I really come back to it starts from here. It starts from the leader within. And I think we each need to take personal responsibility for that. And it is a personal journey. Next steps, I think we, as Manoj said, we at the Human Wisdom Project are coming up with packages, leadership development and wellbeing packages for schools, where we can look at training and look at this in much greater detail. And we're definitely keen to have schools that are willing to come on board with that, to work with us to make sure that we are doing this in the right way to make the biggest impact that we can. There's a talk, certainly in this country, the government has set up things like the Staff Wellbeing Charter. So this is another avenue of what do we do for staff? What are we doing for each member of staff in order to help them progress and develop themselves and look after their own well-being? And I come back again to the personal responsibility. It doesn't fall on leaders to ensure that all of our staff are feeling all right all of the time. It falls on us as leaders to put the right things in place, but it falls on each person to take personal responsibility for what they do with their own well-being and leadership development.
Thank you, Dominic. So my last comment, I think, would be that education is about learning. Right? But at the moment, we're only learning about the world around us and not about ourselves or how our minds work. And we just need a rebalancing, I think, rather than this talk of war and tugging and all of that, just a rebalancing. And if we bring this learning about ourselves into education, in whatever shape or form, I don't know have the exact blueprint, all the issues we're talking about would find their rightful place and balance. And we then create excellent human beings who could live happily, meet challenges with calm, have happy relationships, be excellent human beings, care for themselves, each other, and the earth. And we could change the future of humanity. And which is why I think education is the most important profession in the world, and why it needs to be supported. And that's what we're trying to do at Human Wisdom. So thank you all for coming. I'll send you a copy of this and a link to this presentation. And I look forward to engaging with you all. Because beyond being an educator, you're also a human being with a responsibility for the earth we live in and for the future of humanity. So join us. That's our mission. We're trying to change the future of humanity, make the world a better place, transform individual lives, all of that. So if that resonates with you, please get in touch, Dominic at humanwisdom.me, and we'll begin a conversation. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're just trying to share with you a vision that we have to move the whole discussion around education forward and how using education we could transform the future of humanity. So thank you all and have a good day. Okay.
Thank you, Manoj.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Many thanks.
Thank you
That's
for
great.
all our guests for coming today. Thank you, Rachel and Kim and so on. Thank you.